The records, the background records for Chris Clegg that we discussed order
That's fine.
on Monday.
The state had an opportunity to review it.
Yes.
All right, that's fine. I'll go ahead and sign it now. Thank you. And let's go ahead and bring chairs in. Questions for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Approach.
Yes.
So I'm going to show you a couple, Ms. Lee, I want to show you a couple more items. First of which I've marked as State's Exhibit 25, again in a paper bag, but looking at State's Exhibit 25A, does this appear to be the silver laptop that you all purchased?
Yes.
And is it very similar or exactly the same, just in terms of
The
different
same,
colors?
just different colors.
We had talked about a camera being stolen. I'm going to show you what I opened over the break. State's Exhibit 26. The contents is a small camera bag, and then inside there appears to be a camera and maybe a charger. Do you recognize those items?
Yes.
Okay. And does this appear to be the camera that you all had in the leasing agency office before it was broken into?
Yes.
Okay. And you had said it was a Canon small. This is the one you described. Last piece of evidence I'm going to show you is State's Exhibit 27. We had talked about you being in communication with the police department and attempting to help them locate the laptops. At some point, did you actually authorize Lenovo to assist the police department with your laptops?
Yes.
And is this State's Exhibit 27, does that appear to be an accurate copy of the note that you drafted making that authorization?
Yes.
Your Honor, this time the state would move to introduce State's Exhibit 27, the letter from Ms. Lee.
Any objection?
No, sir.
It's allowed.
I don't have any further questions.
Cross-examination?
Just a few questions.
Okay.
So that morning you said that you weren't able to get into the temporary leasing office at all.
Right.
And you said you never went back there. Did you never go back there?
I went back when it was released as after the case.
And is that about a week?
About 2 weeks.
Okay. So that morning, you've mentioned your corporate headquarters. Where are they?
They're in North Hills, just less than a mile away.
Okay. And so that morning, did you sort of go to the area of the apartment complex, but just not go in the leasing office, or did you actually just go to work at the corporate offices?
I just went straight to the corporate office after I received the phone call.
And at some point early on, were you aware of Raleigh Police trying to get a list of names of the people that were currently occupying that building? Were you a part of that conversation?
Yes.
And who was Michael Langley the person who was on site with the Raleigh police, though?
I believe so.
Okay. So you knew that they were trying to get that information together, and did you help get that information together for
Yes.
them? But you did not go with anybody on site that day to
Did
figure
not.
anything out? Okay. The floor plan layout that you identified
Yes.
just now, in some of the units, is that floor plan reversed in some ways so that the rooms are on the opposite side?
It's sometimes, yes. I don't know in this instance exactly.
Okay, so if you were to look again at that floor plan, would you be able to say that, yes, this is how it would have been in Ms. Jones's apartment, or this is actually the reverse of how it would have been in Mrs. Jones' apartment?
I wouldn't be able to clearly state that.
Okay, so some of the units are the opposite,
Yes.
and there's one standard floor plan of that unit that's on the website.
Yes.
And you're not exactly sure whether...
They should have been the same as they're stacked. I would assume they would be exactly the same, but I could be incorrect.
Okay, but you do know that some of them were with those rooms reversed?
Yes.
And did anyone from Raleigh Police or Michael Langley ever contact you about trying to get the names of anybody that might have walked in that downstairs unit?
Yes.
And you're the person who put that list of names together?
I'm not sure if I put it together in conjunction with Mike, probably. We worked together on it.
And did someone have to then contact those people?
Yes.
And were you the one that did that, or do you remember?
I probably did, yes.
And that was just to tell them what, that Raleigh Police would be in touch with them?
Yes.
And you knew that was about their shoes?
Yes.
I don't have anything further on.
Redirect.
And just to follow up with the list of folks that were working in there, were you aware that the police department was attempting to collect their shoes?
I was made aware after they contacted them, yes.
And you provided a list as best you could in connection with Mike in terms of who might have been in that apartment in the recent days?
Yes.
I don't have any more questions.
Anything further? All right, thank you, ma'am. You may step down. Any objection to this witness being released?
No, sir.
All right. Ma'am, you're released from your subpoena and you're free to go. Further evidence for the state?
State calls Clint Merritt.
Swear the testimony you give this court should be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Please be seated.
Ms. Shakita?
State your name, sir.
Clint Merritt.
And Mr. Merritt, how are you employed?
I'm employed with Lenovo, based here in Morrisville.
What are some of your duties and responsibilities at Lenovo?
My role is in corporate information security, so many different areas of responsibility throughout the organization. So,
Can you just kind of highlight, without giving away any sort of secret,
Sure,
course,
sure.
but kind of what some of your responsibilities might be?
everything from compliance, policy, developing policies, and ensuring like our architecture is secure. Yeah,
How long have you been involved or working with Lenovo?
a little over 5 years.
And prior to that, were you working in sort of the same field,
Yes.
internet security, that kind of type of
Yes.
thing? And you said that your building is actually in Morrisville, is that correct?
Yes.
At some point, were you either enlisted or volunteered to assist the Raleigh Police Department with the tracking of some Lenovo laptops.
That's correct, yes.
And do you know how it was that it came to you? Were you the first point of contact?
Actually, they contacted our legal/investigations team, an individual by the name of William Atwell. And he comes to me for a lot of his technical questions, so then internally it hopped over to me.
And specifically in terms of you getting involved with the Raleigh Police Department, initially what was it that they were seeking to see if you could do?
They wanted to find if there was some way of tracking an individual laptop, like a theft detection or some sort of technology that would be able to find a specific laptop that was indicated as a stolen laptop.
And did they give you an idea of the type of laptops that had been stolen? That is, the specific type of Lenovo?
Right. They said it was some yoga units that were stolen. I think it was 2.
And with respect to your knowledge of the Lenovo Yoga laptops, are there, for example, ways to track them or means to track them as they come from the manufacturer?
Out of the box, usually it's very difficult to track them. So there's some specific unique identifiers with the devices. However, most of the times they're hidden, or if the laptop is not used or registered at various sites, it's almost impossible to find them.
And so in terms of trying to assist them with tracking them, was there much you could do in terms of tracking them without any of those unique identifiers?
Exactly.
So I know some people have iPhones and you can install an app. It's not as easy as that.
Well, you could install an application on a laptop to do that, but they don't come pre-installed with that kind of software.
And so at that point, were you able to give them any assistance in terms of trying to locate them remotely?
Not through electronic means, right?
Did there come a time when you received a phone call from a Raleigh detective in terms of some information that they had looking for your assistance to identify whether it might relate back to those?
Sure, there was a follow-up call.
And can you describe what kind of information was presented to you at that time?
Sure, the detective was asking if he was able to provide a Windows serial number. Would I be able to map that back to a physical device serial number?
And when you say a Windows serial number, what do you mean?
Well, the operating systems that come preloaded on the machines have a serial number. It's a unique identifier for that software. That way the vendor can track what systems and who has the software installed to the individual serial number.
And just to be clear, when it's initially installed, is that typically when the computer is purchased then?
Right. There's a preload put on the computer before it ships out.
And when the detective contacted you and said that they had this unique Microsoft serial number, were you able to assist them?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury how you went about trying to figure out if it would match one of the stolen
Sure.
numbers?
So I took that number that was provided by the detective and was able to cross-reference it with an individual serial number of a laptop, and that serial number did match one of the stolen laptops that they were looking for.
And how were you able to do that? Is that an internal system that you have at Lenovo, or just generally speaking, how were you able to do that?
There's an internal system. It's called a like an asset management or asset identifier for the products that get shipped, and in that database it's got everything from serial number to type of hard drive, whatever the physical aspects and items that were shipped in the original box to the customer.
And is that something that you yourself did alone, or did you work in connection with some other folks at Lenovo?
Certainly I don't have access to all of our systems in Lenovo, so I did seek some help from our services department. I knew an individual in our services department that could pull up that database and give me access so that I could cross-reference that serial number with the Windows serial number.
And the Windows serial number itself that comes on the individual laptop, is that something that is visible, for example, when you look at the laptop, or is that something that when you turn it on, for example, would come about?
Well, with newer machines, it's in the it's on the hard drive, and they no longer put the little sticker on the laptop. And I think this particular model, it had it built into Windows where you didn't have a physical sticker that showed that serial number.
And so during your conversation with the detective, that is, he's calling you and saying, I've come up with this potential Microsoft number, and you said it's not on the sticker. Do you know how he was able to get this Microsoft number? Did he indicate that to you? I'm sorry.
Yes, he said he found a Craigslist ad, and one of the photos in the Craigslist ad actually showed that Windows serial number on one of the screenshots of the machine. And with that, we were able to positively identify that that was the machine based on its Windows serial number.
As a Lenovo security representative, knowing that you had, at least the police had this potential Microsoft serial number, you have cross-referenced it with the Lenovo information. Is there any chance that that could not come from that particular computer?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Can you state that again?
Were you convinced once you had the Microsoft serial number and the information that you were able to get in the Lenovo database that that was one and the same?
Oh, absolutely.
And I guess a better way to ask that might have been to say, could someone go in and manipulate that in any way?
Very, very unlikely.
And so when he contacted you with that particular number and you cross-referenced it within your system, did you indicate to him whether or not, what amount of certainty were you sure that they belonged to this?
Absolutely, from my perspective. Yeah.
And during that time when he's communicating with you, was he sharing the Craigslist ad, or did he just give you the number for you?
He just gave me the number at that time. I didn't see the Craigslist ad at first.
At the time that you were assisting law enforcement, either now that they've got this unique number or during the course of the investigation in general, did they tell you how many Lenovo laptops had been taken?
They said they were looking for 2.
And with respect to those laptops, were they able to provide you with the serial numbers for those laptops?
Yes, they were.
The sort of internal mechanisms that you have, well, let me ask it this way. When a person, for example, if I went into Best Buy and purchased a Lenovo laptop straight off the shelf, does Lenovo keep statistics and all the information that's installed on those particular units?
Right.
And when the police department provided you with the serial numbers, were you able to run it on both of those computers?
I was able to look up both serial numbers and find the information about each of those units.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
I'm going to show you first State's Exhibit 28 and then 29. First, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 28, which I believe is a one-page document, and ask if you recognize that.
Oh, yes.
And what is State's Exhibit 28?
You're asking me
Yes.
what this is? It's a printout of from the database I mentioned earlier about that specific serial number, and it gives all the associated parts and description of the unit that was in that box.
And is this a document that is all of the information that is associated with a particular serial number of a
Yes.
laptop? Is that something that you all keep in the ordinary course of business at Lenovo?
That's correct.
Like I said, when it comes off the shelf, you all keep that.
We have a record of all of them, yes.
And you had indicated that this was the process that you used to try to determine whether the Microsoft serial number belong to a particular computer, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so is State's Exhibit 28 the actual printout or a copy of the printout from Lenovo as it relates to the serial number here that starts with EB325?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time the state would move to introduce State's Exhibit 28 into evidence.
Any objection? It's allowed.
And then State's Exhibit 29, you had indicated that they had told you that there were 2 laptops that were taken.
That's correct.
And again, does this look to be a printout of a different computer? And I'll just, for the record, say it's EB3307 is the beginning of that serial number.
Yes, that's accurate.
And both of the numbers that were provided to you, was that from law enforcement?
Yes.
And again, a State's Exhibit 29, which is actually 2 pages versus 1, does that appear to be a record that is kept in the ordinary course of business at Lenovo?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time the state would move to introduce State's Exhibit 29 into evidence.
Any objection? It's allowed.
Specifically with State's Exhibit 28, Judge, I would ask permission to publish copies to the jury.
Yes. Bailiff, if you'll distribute those to jurors, please. Thank you.
Mr. Merritt, now that the jurors have copies, I'm going to turn your attention to State's Exhibit 28. You had indicated that you had a call about the Windows manufacturing number. Or serial number, sorry. Generally speaking, can you tell us where it is on this page?
Sure. It's I guess that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines, maybe from the bottom, which starts with, or at least the description starts with Windows 8 Standard MMDPK.
And then the number following that's a long one, 1796036561568.
Correct.
And is that the number that was provided to you, or some combination of that, from the detective in this case?
Right. It was one of these 2. I can't remember which one, but it was one of them.
And to your right, there are 2 Lenovo Yoga pads. Do those appear to be the kind that would be in question in this case?
Yes, that's correct.
Safe to say you never saw the computers and you don't know what they were, but those look like that type.
They look like the ones, right?
After assisting law enforcement in determining whether sort of remotely you could assist them in finding them and then giving this information, did they make any further requests of Lenovo at that time?
Nothing beyond that. Once I confirmed that there was a match, yeah, that was the end of the communication for a while.
And just to be clear, when the detective was talking to you about the information he sent on Craigslist, at the time that you were providing information, did he send it to you or just give you the number?
He gave me the number at the time, yes.
I can have just one moment, Judge.
Yes.
And looking now at State's Exhibit 29, right there in front of you. The 2-page document.
Yes.
Again, is this the additional serial number that we talked about?
Yes.
Your Honor, and I would ask to publish copies of that as well.
That's fine.
And while they may look the same, the serial numbers on each one are sort of the way to distinguish the two. Is that correct?
That's correct. No.
And again, on States Exhibit 29, in addition to all kinds of other installed or things that may be associated with the computer, do you also see the Windows 8 and the serial number following that on States Exhibit 29?
Oh, on here,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
I do.
And you had been asked again to look at two different serial numbers. I'm going to ask you to look here at EB33, and I'm looking at States Exhibit 29, the front and back page for the jury. EB3307 9642. Do you see that serial number on one of these two boxes?
Yes, right here.
Okay.
In
And that's
this box.
States Exhibit 22. And you can States Exhibit 22.
Okay.
22.
Okay.
Okay. And then specifically looking at the serial number on the second page, EB32562684, does that appear on States Exhibit 23?
Yes, it does.
And so in terms of you were asked to look at different serial numbers for computers, do those two computers, the characteristics of which are on 28 and 29, match up with the boxes from 22 and 23?
Yes.
This pad itself, the yoga, on the outside, is there any serial number that you can identify it from?
Yeah, this was about the time that we started changing our labeling process, where you didn't have as many labels because there wasn't as much room. So a lot of it's internal
Okay.
instead of physically on the unit. It's on the box. It's on the hard drive.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any further questions, Judge.
Cross-examination.
Mr. Merritt?
Yes.
So there are, just to sort of dumb it down for just a quick second, there's two different types of serial numbers that have been involved in this conversation.
Yes.
And if any of this is sort of a misunderstanding of what you've explained, just tell me. But my understanding is that the computer itself has the serial number.
Correct.
And that's the serial number that's on those boxes.
That's correct.
And then that serial number is included somehow, it's written, I assume, digitally onto the hard drive.
Yes.
And then the Windows also has a serial number for their product,
Sure.
which is each individually licensed piece of Windows 8 has its own serial number.
Correct.
And Lenovo acquires that from Windows.
Yes.
And so the database that Lenovo keeps is of all of the different components and aspects to each one of the physical computers that have been sold.
Correct.
And so that Windows serial number is on that list with all that other data and information.
That's right.
And it's just identified by that serial number because Windows has some sort of wish to individually mark each one of its distributed software.
Exactly.
Great.
Anything further?
No, sir.
All right, sir, you may step down.
All right, thank you.
Any objection to this witness being released?
No, sir.
Sir, you're released from your subpoena. You're free to go.
All right, thank you.
Further evidence for the state?
State calls Detective Mendez.
Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right fist. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you, sir. Please be seated.
Shakita.
State your name, sir.
Gory Mendez.
And how are you employed?
I am currently employed with the Raleigh Police Department as a detective.
And are you currently assigned to a particular unit within the detective division?
Currently assigned to the Technical Assistance Response Unit, also known as TARU.
And what is the Technical Assistance Response Unit?
We assist other detectives and officers with their investigations with the use of technology.
And so how is it that it comes that, for example, you would assist another investigator if they needed some help?
Some of our duties or job description is to assist with analyzing phone records, cell phone towers, GPS mapping, installing covert cameras, things of that nature.
How long have you been working in that particular unit?
Approximately 4 to 5 years now.
And how long have you been with the Raleigh Police Department in total?
I have a total of 16 years of law enforcement experience in the state of North Carolina. 3 prior years with the city of Winston-Salem, and then the remaining with the city of Raleigh.
It's about 13 years?
More like, yeah, about 13 years.
I'm really not very good at math, okay. Were you asked to assist members of the homicide unit in regards to the murder of Melissa Huggins-Jones?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell us how it was that you came involved with this case?
On May 21st of 2013, we were given information that a subject by the name of McCullum was a person of interest. At that time, I was in plain clothes operating a covert unmarked police vehicle. We were given the address of where Mr. McCullum was living at the time.
Was that in the city of Raleigh?
No, ma'am.
And what, generally speaking, where was that?
The town of Wake Forest. We were also given a description of the vehicle that Mr. McCullum was also either owned or was known to operate.
And you said you were given, is that some information that others shared with you, or is that something you would have developed in your capacity in your unit?
It was information that was shared with us.
And once you got Mr. McCullum's residence address and a car that he either owned or was known to operate, what all did you do?
Responded to that location and conducted surveillance.
And when you say location, where did you go? To his home?
His home, ma'am.
What, if anything, happened when you got to the address in Wake Forest?
Shortly after I arrived, around 2 o'clock that day on May 21st, 2013, we saw some activity where it was 1 male and 2 females that exited Mr. McCullum's home and entered into that vehicle that he was known to operate, which was that Mitsubishi vehicle.
What did you do at that point?
We followed the vehicle. Myself and other assisting undercover officers followed the vehicle. The vehicle left McCollum's parking lot, or the residence to his parking lot, and traveled down Main Street and drove to the Walmart, which is in Wake Forest.
How far would you say that residence was from the Walmart?
Maybe a 5-minute drive. It's nearby.
You said you and other officers, about how many folks were you working with to do that sort of surveillance?
The exact number I'm not sure, but there was more than, I believe, 3 of us that were following the vehicle.
And when you're following the vehicle and there are 3 other folks, are they in different cars or are you all together?
Separate vehicles.
Were you talking with them during this time that you were, for example, following the car from the residence to the Walmart?
Yes, we were all communicating with each other via hand radios.
What happened, if anything, when you all got near the area of Walmart?
We followed the vehicle to the Walmart, where it parked in a general parking space, and I parked nearby as well. I observed the male subject, who was later identified as Mr. Travion Smith, and 2 females all exit the vehicle and walk into the Walmart.
Let me stop you at the point where they are going into the Walmart, that is 1 black male and 2 black females. Were you aware of who that black male was?
At that time, I was not.
And just to make sure I'm clear, you initially were set up to look for Michael McCullum. Were you trying to determine if that black male that you later identified as the defendant was Mr. McCullum?
Yes, that is correct.
At the time they walk into the Walmart, that is the male and 2 females, did you know who any of them were at that specific time?
I did not.
And once they walked into the Walmart, what happened?
We remained in our positions where we were able to maintain visual of the vehicle, hoping that they would return to the car. Shortly after, maybe a 20, 30-minute time frame, only the 2 females returned to the vehicle and drove off. The 2 females in that Mitsubishi vehicle were followed by the other assisting detectives, and I stayed in the area attempting to locate this male that I had not identified.
When the male walked into the Walmart, was it with the 2 females?
Yes, ma'am.
And then when they walked out, you didn't see him, is that correct?
That's correct.
So what did you do in trying to identify him at that point, now that the females have left?
I circulated the area, trying to locate him. I remember the description of his clothing that he was wearing at the time. And as I was driving around the area, about 5 minutes later, in a nearby parking lot of another shopping center next to the Walmart, I observed the same individual, Mr. Smith, now sitting in the passenger seat of a different vehicle, which was a small gray car. I don't remember the make or model.
Let me stop you now. So you noticed that he's in a different car. Do you know how he got there, or you just realized he was over there?
I have no idea how he got there. I just realized he was there.
So for a period of time, you lost sight of him?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you estimate how long elapsed from when he went into the Walmart to you now see him in another car in the general area?
From the time he went into the Walmart and they were done shopping and the females returned, that was approximately 20 to 30 minutes. And then about another 5 minutes later of me driving around the area, I ended up locating him. So we'll say a total of about 30 to 35 minutes.
Once you notice that is he actually in the car or approaching, where is he with respect to this other car?
He was inside the vehicle.
What happened at that point?
At that time, he was engaged in a conversation with another black male standing next to the vehicle and 2 other females, I believe. The other black male, I believe his name was Ronald Anthony. I still wanted to identify this guy to see who he was because he had just come from the location where we were preparing ourselves to execute a search warrant on that location. So I just wanted to see who he was. We ended up following Mr. Smith and Ronald Anthony and another female. Eventually, they all walked back over to the Walmart.
And let me make sure I'm following you. So you see him seated in a car, that is the defendant, Travion Smith, seated in a car. Does Ronald Anthony get in the car, or he's standing by the car? Where is he in relation to the defendant?
Ronald Anthony was standing outside of the vehicle, and they were just engaged in a conversation.
And the female that you described, where was she in relation to, say, Ronald Anthony and this defendant, Travion Smith?
I believe she was also standing outside of the vehicle nearby.
Okay. And so you said you still wanted to identify later who you learned to be Mr. Smith. At the time that you're talking about Ronald Anthony, did you know his name either?
I did not, no ma'am.
So what happens after you're watching these three at or in the car? What do you do next?
During my surveillance, eventually they all walked back over to the Walmart, where I see them standing out in front of the Walmart again. A few minutes later, I observed a Wake Forest patrol vehicle driving into the parking lot of the Walmart. I approached the Wake Forest officers and identified myself. Informed them that we were conducting an investigation, possibly executing a search warrant at a nearby location, and that this individual had just left that location, and we just wanted to identify him, not knowing his involvement in the case.
And so how, if at all, did that Wake Forest officer assist you?
The Wake Forest police officers, on a voluntary encounter, approached them. Were able to identify them, and at that time we discovered that Mr. Smith had a...
Let me stop you there. So when he walks up, does he just ask him who they are? The Wake Forest officer?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm present nearby.
Sure.
I did not approach with them,
Okay.
but from a distance.
And were they able, and at that point, was that when you learned that one was Travion Smith and the other was Ronald Anthony?
Yes, ma'am.
And you, let me stop you before what happens next. You said that during this time you're trying to identify this defendant, Mr. Smith, because you're going to execute a search warrant on the house of Michael McComb. Is that right?
Correct.
And so at the time that you're there in the Walmart parking lot, did you know what was going on at the residence, that is Mr. McCollum's residence?
Yes, I did.
Prior to going out there and knowing that Michael McCollum was a person of interest for the homicide unit, did you know specifically what his connection was to the homicide, or you all were just trying to follow him?
I was just trying to follow him and identify him, not knowing his involvement, and in case they wanted to speak to him at a later date and time.
And to be clear, when he got in the Mitsubishi Eclipse initially and drove to the Walmart, or rode to the Walmart, did he come from the building that you all were doing surveillance?
Yes, ma'am.
When you learn that the two gentlemen now in front of the Walmart are Travion Smith and Mr. Anthony, do you make arrangements, or someone make arrangements, to have them brought into the investigative division for questioning?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you involved with that, or did you just make arrangements to have that?
I just made arrangements, and 2 Raleigh patrol vehicles arrived and transported them to the police station.
While during that 25 or 30 minutes when you lose sight of this defendant and then you see him again at a car in the parking lot, were you making other efforts to try and find him or identify him? We
did. Myself and other assisting detectives made contact with the loss prevention personnel at the Walmart in an attempt to review surveillance video of who that individual was that walked into the building or their store.
So during that 30 minutes, you're still trying to figure out who this gentleman is?
Yes, ma'am.
And after you all had the Wake Forest police officers stop and talk with this defendant, Ronald Anthony, and arrangements were made to bring them to the investigative division, did you have any further responsibilities in this case?
No, ma'am. I had no further action.
And again, just to be clear, when they're asking for your assistance with the Taylor unit, did you know what any of their involvement may be, or you were just trying to figure out why he was at the house?
Yes, ma'am.
That question was really long, but did you understand?
I do.
While you were there and the Wake Forest officer made contact with the 2 black males, did you see where the other female went that they were talking to at the car?
I do not remember. I think she went into the Walmart for a short period of time,
Okay.
and I believe she may have come back out after the police were speaking to them.
And was the female that you saw in the second encounter with the defendant in another car, was that one of the females, just to be clear, that had come from the house and gone back?
I don't believe so.
And do you recall the female, was she a white female or a black female? The second, that is, you said 2 black females came initially, but the female at the car, do you recall? She was white or black, sorry.
Okay, the second time that I regained visual
Yes.
of Mr. Smith and Mr. Anthony when they were together, I believe it was a white female that was with them.
And you said that you were not sort of focused on identifying her at that time. It was the gentleman that had come from Mr. McCullough's residence.
Yes.
Did you have any further responsibilities with the search or anything that was happening at McCullough's residence once you had identified these 2?
No, ma'am.
And to your knowledge, were other law enforcement officers actually conducting the search of that?
I believe they were, yes.
I don't have any further questions.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor.
When you say driving around the area, it's like most Walmarts, correct? There's a very large parking area at the Walmart. Is there a very large parking area?
At that Walmart, yes, ma'am. It's a large parking area.
And there are the other mall you indicated, it's sort of in the parking lot area of the Walmart parking lot?
No, ma'am. It's 2 separate parking lots, 2 separate structures, building structures, but still maybe within 50 to 100 yards of each other.
But not what you would describe as a sort of an outbuilding from the Walmart? I mean, I understand it's a separate structure, but you would sort of turn into them at the same turnoff on the main road, correct?
There's other ways to gain entry into either parking lot. I'm not sure if I understand your question.
I was just, my understanding, you had a video surveillance on your car during this time you were driving around, correct? So it shows the parking lot as you're driving around, it recorded that.
Yes, ma'am. There was a camera in my vehicle.
And it appears to just be driving around large parking areas
Correct.
and never going back out onto any main streets.
No, ma'am.
So I was just, when you said it was a separate shopping center, that's all I was trying to clarify, is that it's all sort of there together in the same large shopping area.
Yes.
And the person who was later identified as Mr. Smith was sitting in the passenger seat of that car when you saw him?
I believe he was an occupant in the car. Yes. Specifically, if my memory recalls, I think he was in the front passenger seat, and I was able to identify him based on the hat that he was wearing. It was a distinctive hat. I described it in the supplement, and that's what initially caught my attention.
So no, I just was just clarifying, not in the driver's seat. In the passenger seat is what you recall.
Yes, ma'am.
I have nothing further.
Anything further?
Detective Mendez, do you recall the hat, what it looked like?
Yes, it's in my supplement. I remember it was black with a red brim or something similar to that, and that's what just stood out when I was driving around the area, and that's what caught my attention.
And so if you wrote a black ball cap with a red brim, is that what you remembered?
Yes, ma'am.
No further.
Anything further? All right, thank you, sir. You may step down. Any objection to this witness being excused?
No, sir.
Sir, you're released from your subpoena. You're free to go.
Thank you.
Further evidence for the state?
State Cost Detective Morris.
Could you place your left hand on the Bible? So here. You solemnly swear the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I will.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Shakita?
Please state your name, sir.
Detective Zeke Morse, Zekemorse.
And how are you employed?
I am a detective with the Raleigh Police Department,
How long have you been with the Raleigh Police Department?
20 years,
How long have you been with the detective position?
since 2004.
Are you currently assigned to a particular unit within the detective division?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that unit?
I am assigned to one of the homicide units
How long have you been in the homicide unit?
since June of 2007.
And is it safe to say in May of 2013 the death of Melissa Huggins-Jones was not the first one you investigated?
Correct.
We've heard a lot of talk about Detective Brady. When a case comes into the homicide unit, is there someone that's tapped to be the lead investigator?
Yes, ma'am.
And how does that come about?
That is a rotation basis. You're on top of the list, and the next homicide that comes in will be your case.
And when a case, for example, this case was assigned to Detective Brady, does the remainder of your unit attempt to assist him with whatever needs to be done?
Absolutely. Regardless who the case is assigned to, for the lead detective, the entire unit works together on that one case.
On May 14th of 2013, were you all working, or how did you first get involved with the death of Melissa?
When the call came in, it was the start of our shift. Some of us were already in the office. Some of us were coming in at that point. If I recall correctly, I had not reached the office yet. I was on my way into the office when I received a phone call from Detective Brady.
What were some of your first responsibilities on that morning?
I was tasked with obtaining a search warrant for the residence of Melissa Jones, as well as a search warrant for the apartment that was being used as an office.
And can you describe for the jury what a search warrant is and why you need to go get one?
Sure. A search warrant is a legal document that gives us the authority to go into a private residence and search and collect evidence from those scenes.
And when you go to obtain one, is there someone that has to sign off there by authorizing the search?
Correct. In this search warrant, I write my probable cause affidavit. It is the reason for the search. That search warrant is reviewed by a judicial official, either a judge or a magistrate. In this case, the warrant was reviewed by a magistrate and signed.
And once you got the search warrant for those two locations, what did you do with them?
I brought those two search warrants to Detective Brady, who was at the scene.
What do you do now that you've provided the search warrants in terms of your responsibility?
Depending on where the investigation is, I'm given additional tasks.
And what were some of those on that first day?
That morning, I became aware of other crimes that had occurred in the area, specifically some larcenies from motor vehicles, and I was tasked with researching those a little bit further.
Earlier, we heard from Detective Falk. Were you working with him on those?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you said you were researching those, what, if anything, generally did you do?
I reviewed the calls themselves. I reviewed the reports that had been written at that point to see if there were any leads that could be followed up on.
And did you try and follow up with some of the folks who might have been involved with those break-ins?
I did.
And did you recall who it was that you followed up with initially?
Initially, I spoke with Miss Esther Hall. She called to report that a car had been broken into, and she had seen some folks that night.
And was she able to give you some descriptions of the folks that she had seen that night?
Yes, ma'am.
After speaking with Miss Hall, what, if anything, did you do next?
I met with Sergeant Copeland at that point. Sergeant Copeland at the time was the sergeant of the burglary division. I met with him to discuss any current burglary patterns that might be going on in the city.
Why, generally speaking, would you want to look into that kind of information?
With the burglary of the office, of the apartment that was being used in an office, I felt like if we investigated the burglary, it might lead us to a suspect in the death of Melissa Jones.
And during the time that, say, you're doing these responsibilities, Detective Falk has already testified about some of the things that he was doing. Are you as a unit sharing information that you learned?
Absolutely. Early on in an investigation, we are talking with each other. We're also having meetings where we all sit down together and we share the information we've gathered so far.
And what were some of your next responsibilities there on the 14th?
I responded to the crime scene and I assisted with walking the area around the crime scene itself, the parking lots and the wood lines.
And did you notice anything unusual at that time?
At that time, I did not.
what, if anything, were some of your next duties?
Approximately 7:30 that evening, I met with Robert Jones at the Raleigh Police Department and conducted an interview with him.
And who was Robert Jones in relation to this case?
He is the divorced husband of Melissa Huggins.
To your knowledge, had he come from Tennessee to meet with you all?
Yes, ma'am.
And did he bring anyone with him?
He did.
And who did he bring with him?
He brought his son, Noah, with him.
And did you speak with Noah, or did someone speak with him?
I spoke with Noah.
After talking with Noah and Robert Jones, what did you do next?
The following day, I attended the autopsy of Melissa Jones.
And can you generally tell us, when you say you attended, what happens and what were your duties at that time?
As a law enforcement officer, when we attend an autopsy, we are not participating by any means. We are in a separate room separated by glass. We can observe the autopsy. Attending the autopsy gives us the opportunity to speak to the doctor who will be performing that autopsy, sharing information with them about the case and an investigation so far, and requesting certain items to be collected from the victim.
In addition to the police department attending the autopsy, does someone from the CCBI, the City County Bureau of Identification, typically attend as well?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall in this case if someone did?
They would have, yes.
And after reviewing that and talking about whether or not there were any items that might need to be collected, did you take anything with you, or did you request anything specific be done?
I requested that fingernail clippings be taken from Melissa Jones, and I requested that the sexual assault kit be completed.
And why did you ask for a sexual assault kit to be completed?
At that point in the investigation, it wasn't known if she was sexually assaulted. We would have collected it to see if that may produce a lead later on.
And in addition to attending it, did you bring anything to the autopsy?
I brought a tooth. Later on, a tooth had been found at the crime scene. I took possession of that tooth from Detective Brady and brought that to the medical examiner's office.
You're my first witness?
Yes.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 30 and ask if you recognize State's Exhibit 30.
I do.
And what is State's Exhibit 30?
This is a sexual assault evidence collection kit. It has a specific report number on here, P130545457, which is the Raleigh Police Department number assigned to this case. It also has the victim's name, Melissa Huggins-Jones.
And with respect to State's 30, when was the first time that you actually saw that item?
That would have been at the medical examiner's office.
And after that kit was collected, what happened with it?
I brought it to the SBI for analysis.
When you took it from the medical examiner's office, was it in a sealed condition, much like it is now?
Yes, it would have been exactly like this, sealed.
Does it appear to have additional markings on it since the time that you collected it?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that consistent with your knowledge of how sexual assault evidence collection kits are examined later on down the road, for example, at the SBI?
Absolutely.
You said that you took it to the SBI. Did you take any additional items to the SBI?
I did.
And what types of items did you take?
There were several swabbings taken from the crime scenes that appeared to be blood. I went to CCBI and collected those swabbings from CCBI and brought those to the SBI as well.
And to be clear, those swabbings themselves of what you said appeared to be blood, did you collect the actual swabbings themselves at the time they were collected?
No, ma'am.
And when you said you went to the CCBI, how was it that you got possession of those items?
I met with CCBI evidence custodian Anita Smith, and I checked the items out of their evidence.
And when you went to the CCBI to get those items from evidence, what kind of instructions did you give to Ms. Smith about what you were looking for, if anything?
I was collecting the swabbings that had been collected from the scene, and when I collect those, I sign them out on an evidence log.
But for example, did you go into her and say, I'd like to take anything that may have blood, or how did you go about taking the certain items that you took?
It had been discussed in one of our earlier meetings that we were going to test these swabbings.
I'm going to show you several things, if I may approach, Judge.
Yes.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibits 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, and 36. I'm going to ask Detective Morse that you look at these items 31 through 36 and ask if those appear to be the swabbings that you took with you to the FBI along with the kit that's now left with Stacy Smith.
Yes, ma'am, they are.
And again, you didn't collect those items that are within 31 through 36, is that correct?
Correct.
But the decision had been made in a meeting that they should be submitted along with the kit in front of you.
Correct.
And again, looking at the items, do they have, for example, the case number and things of that nature that would lead you to believe they are the swabbings that were collected in this case?
Yes, ma'am. It has the CCBI report number, has the Raleigh Police Department report number, has the date and the time, victim's name, the address, the offense, various markings that specifically identify these items.
And when you took all of those items, 31 through 36, were they also in a sealed fashion to the SBI?
Yes, ma'am.
To your knowledge, will the SBI take items that aren't sealed?
They will not.
After taking those items to the SBI, did you have further responsibilities in this case?
Yes, I did.
And you had indicated that you spoke with Mr. Jones initially and did an interview. Throughout the course of your investigation, did you speak with him on more than one occasion?
Yes, ma'am.
And what kinds of things generally would you follow up with him on?
Periodically, questions would arise that maybe I didn't ask earlier, and I would have to call him or meet with him to ask him clarifying questions.
And to your knowledge, or to the best of your understanding, was he cooperative and try and give the information to you?
Yes, ma'am.
You had said that at one point you went and sort of did a search around the Melissa's apartment, and at that time didn't find anything. Did you go back to the apartment?
Yes, I did.
And when did you go back?
It would have been on May 15th.
And why did you go back at that point?
I'm sorry, that was on May 16th. At this point, we're still, we don't have a suspect identified. We are expanding our search, and we went back to the scene and simply expanded the search around the apartment in the adjoining open areas, looking for any evidence.
And at that point, what, if anything, did you notice?
I located a pink jewelry box that was lying on the ground next to a chain link fence that separated I-40 from a city street.
And what did you do with that pink jewelry box?
It was collected.
Did you collect it yourself, or did you ask someone to come out and do it?
I believe CCBI responded and collected that.
At that time, did you know if it had anything to do in connection with this case, or you just wanted to be sure?
I wanted to be sure. It looked like relatively new. It hadn't been weathered. It looked obvious to me that this might be related.
At this point, now we're a couple of days into after Melissa's death. Had any suspects been identified at this point, or are you all still trying to figure out what happened?
No suspects had been identified.
And were you made aware that there were some electronics that were taken in connection with the downstairs burglary?
Yes, ma'am.
Before I get to that, were you speaking, if someone, for example, would call the police department and say, I have an idea, or here's something I want you to follow up, were those the kinds of things that you and the other members of your unit were following up on?
Absolutely.
Are you familiar with Crime Stoppers?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
Crime Stoppers is a toll-free line a citizen can call and give information anonymously concerning an active investigation.
And can Crime Stoppers calls yield valuable information?
Sometimes they can.
Can they lead you on a wild goose chase?
Absolutely.
With respect to anyone that was calling into Crime Stoppers at this point, were either you or one of the other members following up on those leads?
We follow up on all, yes, ma'am.
Even if they're wild goose chases?
Yes, ma'am.
And you said throughout the course of the next couple of days you all are meeting regularly, is that safe to say?
Yes, ma'am.
With respect to the items the electronics that were stolen, Detective Falk earlier had indicated that either you or himself were trying to get the serial numbers for those items.
Yes.
Why do you want the serial numbers, for example, for a laptop or a camera that might have been stolen?
It allows us to locate the laptops when they're recovered at a later time, whether they're recovered on the street, recovered at a pawn shop, or wherever.
And how is it that you're notified? Is there a way to sort of track that?
There are there's a national database maintained by the FBI called NCIC. One of the things we can enter into this database is stolen items, like a computer with a serial number. So if this computer was found in Virginia and an officer ran the serial number, they'd be able to contact us and let us know they found this stolen computer. There's also local databases that we utilize if the stolen item ends up in a pawn shop. That will be notified.
And did you make efforts, either you yourself or Detective Falk, to make sure that the serial numbers got into all of those databases such that if it was turned into one of those places or recovered in one of those means that you would be able to track it?
Absolutely.
Were you given information about the nature, the type of laptops that were taken?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you do in terms of not entering them into databases, but determining whether you could locate them?
I did a couple different things. We had the original boxes that came in when they were purchased.
Yes.
They're down here on the floor. Detective Morse, I'm going to show you what have already been introduced into evidence as 23 and 22. Are those the boxes that you're referring to?
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. What did you do with those?
We were told that they were purchased from Best Buy. The first thing I did was I went to the Best Buy store and asked them about the capabilities of the two computers and possibly what we could do to locate them by means other than just the serial number if they were found on the street or at a pawn shop. There were other ways for us to track them.
And was there any information that they gave you that you could follow up on in terms of locating them?
No, ma'am.
What did you do next, if anything, in terms of trying to find those Lenovo laptops?
I contacted Lenovo and eventually met with the folks out there in Morrisville.
And what was the purpose for you meeting with them?
I met with Lenovo folks out at the Morrisville campus to ask them their input on a way we could track these computers if they were hooked up to the internet and maybe not located at a pawn shop or located on someone's person.
And was there any information that you gained from that meeting that would help you to do that?
At that point, no. They were genuinely interested. They wanted to do what they could, and I know that they were going to put their brains together and figure out a way to track these computers.
But at that point, nothing really concrete that you could go with that?
No, ma'am.
Did there come a time when you got some additional information on the computers, or you yourself found some information that might be helpful?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell us about that?
Periodically, I was searching various computer sites that are used for resale, specifically Craigslist, eBay, some Facebook pages, and I came across a Craigslist ad where a person was selling a Lenovo laptop.
What day are we talking about now into the investigation?
This was on May 20th.
And what, if anything, did you do once you noticed that there had been a Lenovo laptop posted for sale?
The person selling the computer posted more than one photo of the computer and images of the computer, and I was able to look at those images and obtain specific information from those pictures.
And specifically, when you got that information, what did you do with it?
I contacted Clint Merritt at Lenovo and shared with him the information that I had found and asked him if there was a way to research the information that was posted in these photos, if we could link it to the stolen computers.
And when you're looking, say, at the list, and you said you saw several photographs of this computer that was listed for sale, did you make efforts to document what you were seeing there on the screen, that is, what you were looking at on Craigslist?
Yes, ma'am.
You're right, Craigslist.
Yes.
I'm going to show you what I believe are 5 pages stapled together as State's Exhibit 37. I'll get these out of your way. And ask if you recognize State's Exhibit 37.
I do.
And what is State's Exhibit 37?
This is the Craigslist ad that was posted, and I printed these pictures out.
And it looks like there are 5 separate sort of screenshots themselves. Were those the different things that were being advertised in connection with one computer?
Yes, ma'am.
And once you got the information that was contained within State's Exhibit 37, the Craigslist information, is that what you shared with Mr. Merritt at Lenovo?
Yes.
And what information was he able to use, if at all, to determine whether or not that might be one of the stolen laptops?
Specifically, this picture right here, which is the picture as a snap photo,
You're looking at the very first photograph on
Exhibit 37. It shows a picture of the computer's control panel system and security screenshot of the computer screen itself. And on that screen is a Windows identifying number, the product code.
And when you saw that screen and when you saw that Windows number, did you give that information to Mr. Merritt?
I did.
And was he able to tell you right away, or did he have to do sort of some research on that?
He had to do some research.
When did you talk to him again?
He contacted me the next day.
Okay. And was he able to tell you whether or not that Windows serial number would match one of the laptops that had been taken?
Yes, he did.
And at that point, had you already provided the serial numbers to Lenovo?
I did.
And looking at State's Exhibit 37 in the photographs, does that appear to be a computer that looks very similar to State's Exhibit 24A?
Yes, ma'am.
And after speaking with Mr. Merritt, what was his opinion as to whether or not the computer listed in State's Exhibit 37 on the Craigslist ad was in fact one of the ones stolen?
Initially, he was very certain it was going to be the correct computer, and he was able to confirm it the next day.
Okay, and he was able to confirm it. And so at that point, did you believe as a detective that that ad on Craigslist was one of the computers stolen from the downstairs leasing office?
Yes, ma'am.
And State's Exhibit 37, those 5-page, are these exact copies of what you saw on the screen in that ad?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you change these documents in any way?
No, ma'am.
Your Honor, this time the State would move to introduce State's Exhibit 37 into evidence.
Any objection? They're allowed, or it is allowed.
Looking at State's Exhibit 37 there, Detective Morse, if you need to grab it, it's a little unclear. Are you able to read that number from that ad?
It's difficult with the printed paper as it came out, but it was very clear when it's on my computer screen.
May I approach, Judge?
Yes.
May I approach, Judge?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 38, which is not necessarily from State's Exhibit 37, the Craigslist, but looking at the very first screen shot that you captured in 37, does that appear to be a photograph that is exactly the same as this one?
Yes, ma'am.
And looking at that, does it appear to be sort of the, I think you called it the opening screen or the system screen on the computer?
Yeah, it's a system and security screen.
And are you able to read the Windows identifier from that a little bit better?
Yes.
Just using that?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that Windows number?
0017960471351003. A is an Adam, A is an Adam, O is an Ocean, E is an Edward, M is in Mary.
Thank you. After you have now made certain yourself that this is the computer that's stolen, what, if anything, did you do as a law enforcement officer?
On the Craigslist, the seller listed a phone number to contact if someone was wishing to purchase it. And I called that number and I represented myself as a buyer who was interested in buying the computer.
And what kind of arrangements did you make at that point?
The person I spoke with identified themselves as Mike. I told him I was interested in buying the computer. He told me that it was brand new, that he had it for his employment, but he was currently out on a workers' comp issue and no longer needed it. We agreed that we would meet at the Walmart in Wake Forest, and he would be driving his blue Mitsubishi. And we agreed to meet at, I believe, 4:30 in the afternoon.
And when you now know that you're talking to someone named Mike, did you try and make efforts to figure out who that one person might have been?
I did.
And what ultimately did you determine?
That Mike is actually Michael McCullum of 608 Apartment 17 South Main Street in Wake Forest.
And having that, is that information you got prior to going to meet at this arranged place?
We did not have that information prior to going to meet.
And so what do you do now that you've got this meeting set up at 4:30 in the afternoon?
I contacted several undercover units to provide security at the Walmart parking lot, and I went to the Walmart to meet Mike to purchase the laptop.
And is that the Tayru unit that we just heard about from Detective Mendez?
They would have been there, yes.
At some point prior to meeting with someone that you now believe has this stolen laptop, do you try and figure out who it is, or were you just focused on meeting with that person?
Absolutely. I ran the phone number first through our local report system to see if we'd encountered this phone number prior in any investigation, and we had not. I didn't have the time to wait for further investigation on that phone number with court orders to phone companies and so forth.
And so is it safe to say now on May 20th, this is the first real lead that the police department had?
Absolutely.
And so going out there, did you have any idea who you mean other than someone naming himself as Mike?
No, ma'am.
What happened when you went to the Walmart?
The seller did not show up.
And while you're out there meeting, are there other officers that are trying to do some more in-depth information to determine who Mike is?
Absolutely.
And at some point that evening, was Michael McCullum identified as the potential person?
He was.
When he didn't show, or when the seller didn't show at Walmart, what, if anything, happened next in terms of this investigation moving forward?
I first tried to call the seller a few times to figure out where he was, if he was going to meet me, and I just never got a response from him later on. The following day is when I received the phone call from Clint Merritt at Lenovo, who confirmed that that laptop posted on Craigslist was indeed the stolen laptop.
And at that point, had you identified Michael McCullum in some sort of investigative meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you do now that you didn't have the seller, you believe you know who the person was posting? What did you all do at that point?
Units were sent to the Wake Forest address to surveillance, and while they were doing that, I was applying for a search warrant to search that residence in Wake Forest.
Were you in communication with what the surveillance units were doing at that point?
Absolutely.
And when you got back to, did you bring the search warrant like you had before back to the location to do the search?
I did.
And were you present when that search was done?
Yes, ma'am.
When you were doing that, were you also in communication with what was going on in the Walmart parking lot?
Yes, ma'am.
At some point, did you know from either Detective Mendez or one of the other folks that were in the parking lot that they had identified two folks as this defendant, Travion Smith, and Ronald Lee Anthony?
Yes, ma'am.
And at that time, did you know anything about what their connection might have been to this case?
No, ma'am.
You said that you were at the search itself of Mr. McCullum's residence.
Yes, ma'am.
Was he present when you did that?
No, he was brought to the Atlantic Avenue Police Station for questioning.
May I approach the witness, Judge?
Yes.
In front of you, underneath this 4-inch laptop, is a silver laptop, which I'll now mark. That bag was already identified at 25 and 25A. Did you go inside Mr. McCullum's residence?
I did.
Okay. And inside Mr. McCullum's residence, did you see State's Exhibit 25A?
I did.
Okay. And at that point, who else was present, if you remember?
Detective Brady.
At that point, did you believe that this silver laptop, State's Exhibit 25A, may be the other stolen laptop?
Yes, ma'am.
And where was it, if you recall, inside Mr. McCullum's residence?
To the best of my recollection, it was on the floor to the left of the bed.
Once you found that laptop in Mr. McCollum's residence, did you all want to talk to him in connection with the posting and the other laptop?
Absolutely.
Were you the one who actually interviewed Mr. McCollum?
No, ma'am.
While you were there on scene in Wake Forest, did you have any additional responsibilities after the search was concluded?
Michael McCollum's girlfriend, Chandrea, she was also present at the search. I briefly spoke with her prior to her going to the police station to be questioned further. I also met with other residents of this house that rent various rooms.
And after you finished talking to the folks there at the residence, did you stay in Wake Forest?
I did, yes.
Who did you speak with at that point?
At this point, I've been contacted by Detective Gill. He was one of the detectives at the police station conducting some of the various interviews. I was asked to speak with Amber Albert, who is the girlfriend of Ronald Anthony. She was employed at the Walmart and was working at this time or just ending her shift. And I was asked to go over to the Walmart and speak with her.
We'll break right there. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll break for lunch until 2:30, and we'll resume at that time. While on recess, please recall all the instructions. Don't talk among yourselves or with anyone else about this case. Don't form or express opinions about the outcome. No media or independent investigation into these matters, and no conversations whatsoever with parties, witnesses, or lawyers. Leave all of your materials and notebooks in the chairs. Gather in the deliberation room at 2:30. And if everyone else would remain seated while the jurors excuse themselves.